Coming up next on the Wet Fly Swing podcast.
For sure, a semi-sill leech would be number one. The bait fish brush pattern would be number two. Then I would have a popper for number three. Then I'd have just a simple old woolly bugger for number four. After that, I would probably have some kind of damsel pattern or some kind of a bug imitation, or even my girdle bug I tie. It ain't really mine. I got it out of a book in 99. I just modified it. That I tie for smallmouth on the Umpqua.
That was Mark Middleton on his top flies for bass. Kayak fishing, tournament fishing, Idaho, and family today on The Swing.
Welcome to the Wet Fly Swing Fly Fishing Show, where you discover tips, tricks, and tools from the leading names in fly fishing today.
Hey, how you doing today? Thanks for stopping by the show. We just announced the winner of the Skeena Space School trip that's coming up later this year. We one winner took that home, but we actually have some slots open right now. If you want to grab one of the few paid spots we have to go on this trip, I'm going to be heading up to the Skeena Lodge with Brian Niska. We're going to be digging in. It's going to be an amazing trip. You can check in right now, wetflyswing.com/school. Before we get started, let's hear from our sponsors. Established in 1928, Dette Flies is the oldest family-run fly shop in the world, now in their 94th year. Dette's mission has always been to supply the fly fishing community with the finest products and services. Every fly they sell is either tied in-house or by a handful of select domestic tiers. Please head over to wetflyswing.com/Dette to grab your in-house flies today. That's wetflyswing.com/Dette, Dette, to support this podcast and the oldest fly shop in the world. Today's episode is sponsored by Stonefly Nets, who is putting quality before quantity with their handcrafted custom wood landing nets. When Ethan designs your net, it's his hope and goal to help you form lasting memories every time you're on the water. You can head over to wetflyswing.com/stonefly right now to get started. That's STONEFLY. You support this podcast by clicking through that link to Stonefly online. Mark Middleton, expert tournament bass angler and veteran, shares his story today. We discover how to find bass on Stillwater, what it takes to win a bass tournament, and why he is not a purist in fishing. Mark also shares our family connection and how his family cared for my grandma for over a year when Mark was a kid. This is a really amazing story, something we dig into today. I've known Mark a long time, way back to the old fly shop, and so we talk about that. A little family, a little fishing, and a little fun. Here we go. Making the family connection finally on this podcast. Here we go. Mark Middleton. How you doing, Mark?
Hey, I'm great.
Good. Thanks for putting this together. We've been talking quite a while about this. I've been thinking about this one for a while because of the connection we have with the family. And you've got a bunch of stuff going on, Project Healing Waters. You've got a lot of different fishing interests I want to hear about with bass and all that stuff. Before we dig into that, let's just start right off the top here on the family connection. I want to hear. I've actually got another podcast, which is a family genealogy podcast. So I'm actually going through and interviewing family members, past and present. We just had a family member who passed away recently, and I'm using as my opportunity to help document, so our kids and our kids' kids can hear these stories. So you're part of that family, Mark, you know what I mean? And I want to hear that story. So could you start us off there? Like, what is the connection to my family, my dad, and all that?
Okay, so I had a stepfather named Leonard Sauter, who is your father's cousin. So I always heard of stories about a Doug Stewart fly fisherman. I had no idea who this fellow was. I grew up we actually had your grandmother, Grandma Stewart, living with us when I was in high school.
And which Grandma Stewart was that? Let's clear it because I want to because
I don't remember her first name, but
you don't. I wonder. Well, there was two Marys. So what year was this? What year would have this been?
This would have been in the 70s.
So like 1970 something.
77, 76.
Okay, 77. So 77, 76. So this was Grandma, and she was living with you and where did you guys live?
St. John's, North Portland.
Yeah, so you were in St. John, so 76. So that was about the time, right, 75. So that wouldn't have been my grandma. So that would have been my grandma's grandma. And how old was she?
Then it was his grandma or their grandma. Your
Yeah.
dad. Yeah. She was, so when I was in the Navy, she passed at 90 something. So she had to have been in her 80s then.
Yeah. So okay. So she's in her 80s. Yeah. So that's right. So she's in her 80s. So that would have been. I think her name was Mary too. So that would have been my. So the grandma that I really knew was Grandma Stewart. Was Mary Stewart, my dad's mom.
Oh, then she was the other one. She was
Yeah. So she was
grandma.
the mom, which is cool because so. And talk about that. So why? So my grandma, who was her? Do you know that connection? I'm just trying to think like why was she living with you guys? What was going on there?
There was something happened. I think we went down and got her from California. There was something happened down there in relationship with a family, or she couldn't care for herself. So my stepfather, Bud, opted to run down and get her. And I rode down to California with my uncle to get her down, I want to say Orange County, California. And I was young then, it had to have been 76, 77 in that time frame to go get her so he could just care for her, he and my mother at that time until, she went home, basically. So she was still alive when I went in the Navy in 1978. So, and she passed while I was in the service somewhere along the line there.
1978. Wow. Okay. And did you know? And there's a lot of questions I have here. I want to check in on just some of your family there. But did you know of? So here's a little bit of our family. I think I might have mentioned this to you, but so my dad, is Doug Stewart. He was kind of the infamous fly fishing, right? Had the shop for years out here. A lot of people, might not know him now, but he had the fly shop. His mom was Mary Stewart, who we talked about. That's Mary Stewart, my grandma, and then his grandma was the one that lived with you. But Mary Stewart, my grandma, her brother was Jack Ingram. And Jack Ingram, did you know his story in the Navy?
No, but I heard that name. I'm sure maybe from somebody, your father, whoever. But
Yeah.
no.
So Jack Ingram has this amazing story. I'll have to tell you about at a later point. But he was in the Navy and was a lifelong Navy. Like he literally, it's a really crazy story because when his dad was down in the dumps or they had some hard times, I think they lost their house. He was like, you know what, we're moving down to the Rogue River. They lived on the Rogue River, like basically camping and gold panning. They lived off gold panning for years. And Jack Ingram was his son. And he said that was a very influential part of his life. Well, he went into the Navy not long after that. And because of his work ethic and everything, he worked his way up all the way up to the top. Right. And he was the guy, he was up in Alaska during World War II. He was a big part of the reason why we kept, the Japanese from invading and all that stuff. So it's this really crazy story. There's a book written about him, and I just read the book. And so anyways, I throw that out there just so I don't know. I've never been in the armed services, and I know you have, and I just want to make that connection because it's pretty, I'm living through stories of like that and maybe today from you. But so anyways, now, so we've got a little connection there. But talk about my dad. How did you first meet my dad, who now is in his mid 80s?
So when I got out, so I went in the Navy in 1978 in June, got out after the Gulf War, hurt my leg. So actually I got out disabled veteran. They were on a downgrade from the Navy or any service at that point, trying to get rid of extra people they didn't need after the Gulf. So I had a bad leg, honorable discharge, but on a medical. So I was I was in basically almost 15 years, went in E1, got on E7, which is a chief petty officer. I was up for E8, which I was not happy about getting out because they could have put me maybe on a shore duty, or I thought at the time, but it worked out pretty good when I took custody of my two boys at the time and got out. But anyway, I finally took the leap when I started working. I went out, I started visiting your dad at his shop out there on Halsey and Wood Village. Then at that time, he started poking away with me on how to tie flies. Actually, he was a huge influence on me on tying flies, along with a couple of his buddies. We can get into that later if you want. If not, that's fine. But anyway, he was the first part of my fly fishing adventure. Tying woolly buggers, the ugly ones I used to tie and all that. But I've came a little ways since then, obviously. But I also do other fishing too, as you had said. But so I met him there, and we actually got a connection and started getting bonded. So I think the term he says for me is a shirt tail cousin, which we're not actually blood related, but we kind of own each other in a different way.
Gotcha. Shirt tail cousin, yeah. And that's because, and Leonard Sauter was that your dad or your uncle?
Yeah, we call him Bud. That was my stepfather. Yep.
Stepfather. Gotcha. So Bud was your stepfather, right? And that was the connection. And Bud was was he related blood to the family?
No, he was to your family. Yes, he was your dad's cousin. Yep.
My dad's cousin. Yeah, my dad's cousin. Gotcha. So he was probably one of my, gotcha. Okay. So now we make the connection
He would have
again.
been your second cousin. Yeah.
My second cousin. Okay. Awesome. So good. So that's it. So, and I remember that because I was around there in that time. I was in high school, and I remember seeing you around, right? You're around the shop. And who were some of the other people around there you were around the shop in that time? That was in the early 90s, mid 90s?
Well, at certain times, obviously, I met Jeff, your brother, and Chris. I know both of them. And then at the time, I don't remember a lot of people, but that's where I met Jim Teeney. I met
Oh, yeah.
like Don Stewart, or Don Stewart. Anyway, Don from River City Fly Shop.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Don, not Don Stokes, but yeah, Don.
Nelson, I'm sorry. But anyway, he become another influence in mine, and he was a great guy to me and treated me well as your father. So the same. But those three guys were pretty much influential on me to start fly fishing.
That's right. So the Project Healing Waters, that came later. When did you find out about, or did you know about that pretty quick in that time?
Yeah, so in 2014, I was already tying at the Albany Fly Show. And then, so I heard there was a veteran program that was somewhere in Portland and spread out through the state, different programs in different locations, the same program, obviously, or actual the same program. And then, so I met a couple of the head guys, Project Healing Waters from Portland, Oregon, and that ran the program. And then I started getting involved. So as the time went on, then I started helping veterans tie flies and go fly fishing along with the program. When the COVID hit, it kind of petered out a little bit, but it came back online. So I'm back re-engaged, effective now.
That's right. And so they're in the Albany shows back. And so what are you looking, so re-engage, what are you looking at doing this year, next year?
Helping veterans tie flies and fish when we have, like I've been invited to the upcoming programs coming up, as far as taking like 8, 10 veterans out fishing. And I actually go out and I help them, tie knots, cast flies, provide them with flies. I tie extra flies to take with me. I'll show them how to do those anytime they want to. And then obviously I got a big fly space here, so we don't have to always go to the locations where they have the programs. They can come here and tie as well if they wish to.
Oh, nice. Gotcha. Okay. So yeah, you're fully involved and that's a great program, obviously. And I mentioned we had Beau Beasley on recently, who wrote a book that's coming out. I think it's coming out this month, on some stories of people who were, influenced by the Project Healing Waters, right? Who, a lot of these stories you hear about, it really saved their life. I mean, was that kind of for you the same thing? Did you run into it, or were you kind of already on a good track by the time?
So fishing in general for me is like a church. So I grew up there's 6 siblings or 5 siblings, and I had 2 halves, and we were poor. My dad worked at Armor and Company in Portland here. My mom was a meat wrapper for a while, but it's like we grew up kind of poor, and then when we went out fishing, all the dysfunction and things that created from family, that was my church and my serenity. I still love the sound of a red-winged blackbird of all things. When they sing, it's heartwarming for me. But then, so as far as the veteran stuff goes, it was designed by Ed Nicholson, who I fished with in Alaska on a trip that I went on with Project Healing Waters. And he's a nice guy. He was a Navy captain, but it's designed to help veterans with their psychological and physical disabilities through fly fishing. And it actually works, because when you're out there, you're not thinking about the world's problems. You're thinking about how the water's sounding, the red-winged blackbird singing, just the beauty of being out, and just the nature and the fresh air, and smelling the pines and the firs and the junipers and things like that. So it's actually it's healing, because you're not hearing noises. You don't hear the background noises of war, or being at battle stations, or being shot at for the ground guys. Or me, I was on ships, so that's pretty confined. Or when you're at battle station, you don't know what's going on. You got to kind of wing it.
Right. You got to wing it. Yeah. So you were on a Navy ship for most of your career.
Yeah, well, they separate a little bit. So I was on 4 ships, 2 shore commands, 4.5 Westpac deployments, Pacific, Indian Ocean, Persian Gulf. So there's always hostile waters, just like the ground guys are always in hostile environments. It's all different, but the same. Some guys have it a little worse than others. Some guys stay at home. We all sign the same paper, to give up our life for our country if needed. But some guy feel guilty, not going over there and doing what I did or other guys. But then again, they sign the same paper. You don't always have a call on where you're going to get stationed, so they kind of put you where they need you.
Right. Right. Yeah. So, and what is that in that Navy when you're on the boat? Is that, I mean, it's just probably like, I mean, how is that? How do you get used to that when you're on a boat for a long period of time?
Well, at first you're not. I mean, just in the berthing areas, you got three bunks. You got one near the floor or the deck, and then you got one in the middle and one on top. And then you got generally 40 to 80 people per berthing, depending on the size of the ship. Carriers, you got 3,000 people. So it's
Wow.
loaded. That's 6,000 when you get the air depth. So it's almost
Jeez.
6,000 people on an aircraft carrier. So it's like pretty confined. When you go to battle stations, it's kind of comical. Everybody jumping out, trying to get dressed and get into your stations.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
They're always moving.
So how does that, so you're all, I mean, 3,000, 6,000 people, it sounds kind of like amazing and crazy. So when they go to battle station, literally people are jumping up and within like 30 seconds, you got to get to your station?
Well, I mean, 30 seconds because you can't. But the thing is, it takes you that long to dress. I mean, when you usually got your pants or your trousers hanging off your rack or whatever. But if you're in hostile waters, you're in wartime cruising anyway. So when you're jumping out of racks, everybody's jumping out at the same time, except the watch guys because they're already up. But you got to get there as fast as you can in case you get, you train for that. You train for fires and water damage and how to plug holes, and you're always
Right.
training. So the analogy I tell people that it's like Bruce Lee back in the day. He says, I don't fight, they hit all by themselves. It's the same thing. We always wonder why we train so much, but when the stuff comes down, you do not think about it. It's an automatic response.
Right. Kind of like, well, I hate to make analogies, but kind of like fly fishing or like anything, really. Like the more you do it, right, the more you practice at your casts, the better it becomes. More like you don't have to think about it.
No, that's perfect. And that's exactly right. The more you do it, the better you get at it. The same thing I tell the veterans, I say, you guys can come to these programs, but if this is all you're doing, you're not going to get super good at it. You got to kind of do it at home. You got to kind of do it, not just here. Some guys rely on maybe going to an appointment, maybe going to try to get what they can get out of it. But unless you do it on the side at home or with friends or things that you and I do, that you'll never get good at what you're doing, especially fly fishing.
That's right. Did you guys ever have any of those like real life things out there, like a whole like water or fire, all that stuff?
Oh yeah, you always have fires. Ships always have
Oh,
fires.
really?
Oh yeah, there's always some kind of mild fires, or there's always electrical fires, or especially the older ships. The newer ones, it takes them a while to get there. But I was on some buckets. That's what we called the rusty guys, and I'm telling you, there was always something going on.
No kidding. Wow. So fires on the ship. Yep. Gotcha. Nice. Well, talk about, so you've got some fishing. I know bass is kind of one of your loves and all that stuff. Talk about what that looks like throughout the year. What are you doing out there for fishing?
So bass is my love. So, I was a purist after I met your father, and I was kind of trying to be a purist for 20 years. I kind of cut my throat on that for me, not for other people. The guys that want to go chase steelhead for that amount of time to get one. Hey, that's commendable as heck. I just can't do it. I got to catch fish. That's just what I do. But I fly fish for bass, depending on what time of year it is. But I also have got into Kayak Fishing Northwest, which is a kayak bass thing that goes Oregon, Washington, and Idaho. And once you sign up, you can fish all the tournaments you want, and you can use fly or gear. People just think that it's all gear. It's not. I've did tournaments straight fly fishing, and I've hung with those guys with flies. I've finished in the middle. I finished in the top 10, I think, once with a fly rod. And you got 40 people plus usually in these tournaments, so it's not too bad.
Wow, that's amazing. So so let's dig into that a little bit or a little more on the kayak. So do you have like 10 kayaks, or do you have one that's just awesome you love using all the time?
Well, I have two predominant kayaks that I use. I have a Hobie. It's kind of it's not a pedal drive. It's called a Mirage drive because it goes sideways, but you got a reverse and a forward, and I got steering. So I actually take that. You can take them in the ocean. I haven't done that quite yet. I'm invited all the time, but I do go on the Columbia, the Willamette, all the big lakes in that, and using the Hobie. And you can put like a crate in the back and carry. I think I got my 8 rods, and then if I'm not taking rods, I got it rigged up to where I can take 6 fly rods, and I set them up different depths. When I fly fish the Columbia for smallmouth and stuff, I'll take different sinking lines. I'll take a 24 foot, a 15. I'll have a dry line. I'll have a intermediate line, and maybe a couple other lines set aside, that I might want to use. And they're all rigged up when I go out there, different flies. But then again, I do gear too. Like right now, it's hard to get a fish to catch deep enough to get a fly because they're lethargic. So if you use gear, you're going to be more productive, I think, at this time of year. Because the season started March 1st for season longs. There's 3 season longs I'm signed up for, but I'm not going to start fishing yet till after Albany. I'll be tying down there in Albany. So if anybody wants to say hi, I'll be there.
Bearvault is one way to assure your next backcountry trip stays memorable, epic, and safe. Bearvault builds a rugged polycarbonate locking canister that keeps bears and other wild animals away from your food. This in turn keeps your food safe, keeps the bears safe, and keeps you safe. I've got a classic story that I've told a few times about the bear taking my backpack while up in Alaska. I had my lunch and some snacks in there and just went up around the corner to fish for a bit. And when I got back, it was totally gone. If I would have had that Bearvault right at that moment, I would have been okay because my food would have been completely sealed. The bear would have had no idea and no reason to take my backpack. So a good reminder there. You might not realize it, but this type of thing happens all the time, even to experienced outdoorsmen. The great news for us is now we can experience the great stuff of a remote trip without ever having to worry about animals fiddling with our stuff. Sleep soundly knowing your vault has sealed the deal for you. Believe it or not, food storage is a key consideration while backcountry hiking, fishing, or camping. The Bearvault also has some great bonus features like the see-through sidewall so you can find your stuff really easy, and a large opening, plus it doubles as a nice camp stool. This thing is legit. It definitely is this might be my favorite feature is the camp stool. I love a good chair out there. Check in with the crew at Bearvault at wetflyswing.com/Bearvault. That's Bearvault, BEARVAULT. Okay, back to the show.
What is the kayak? So Kayak Fishing Northwest, what do these tournaments take us to a tournament? What does that look like? Are you fishing mostly the Columbia or all over the place?
So all over the place. So there's a schedule that's put out every year. Marvin Forte, who runs Kayak Fishing Northwest, actually owns it, I believe, at this point. He schedules Idaho, 5 live events every year, and then 5 in Oregon and 5 in Washington. There's also a 6th one in Oregon, which is fly fishing only this year. It'll be at Davis Lake.
Wow, Davis, that's amazing.
Yeah, it'll be a fly fishing only event in kayaks. Anybody, it's an open, so you don't have to sign up for Kayak Fishing Northwest to do this. And any questions, they can get a hold of me or Marvin Forte with Kayak Fishing Northwest. And it's going to be a great event. I'll be there. And we got a sponsor, Portland Fly Shop, sponsoring that event for us, which is going to be fantastic. But also, we don't just have day events. So they're spread out every month. Starting in May, we have a day event per state. And you can do any of them if you're signed up with Kayak Fishing Northwest. The other thing is we do monthly events too, which are kind of online, where you take a picture, send it in. We do that anyway, but you can fish the whole month with no pressure. You can fish anywhere where it's a legal public boat launch, public lake, public pond. You can't fish, private stuff because not everybody's accessible to that.
Gotcha. Wow. So this is cool. So Marvin sounds like he's got this set up for lots of live events and even the online stuff, trying to get basically everybody, like even if you can't get to an event, you could still play the game and get in there.
Yeah. I mean, if you can't go on the day ones, you can darn sure sign up for the month-long ones or the season longs. Season long goes from March 1st to, I believe, the end of September. Yeah. So I'm in 3 of those actively right now, but I haven't fished yet. I'm just getting everything ready to go. My fly boxes are pretty full because, like I said, I don't just gear fish. I got a love of the fly rod, and but then again, I want to compete at the same time. So.
Gotcha. And is this similar? How similar would this be? I'm not sure if you've been out to some of those, like the bass tournament, right? The big bass tournaments out towards the east. Is this similar to that, where you guys are wearing kind of sponsored shirts and all that stuff, or is it more laid back?
I mean, you can, and actually some guys do. But yeah, it's pretty, and there's kayak fishing pro tournaments too, so it ain't just, we're kind of not, I guess if you're making money, you're kind of pro, but you're kind of not, but we're the minor league of that. But there's actually, like, even Mike Iaconelli, the big bass guys, do kayak bass tournaments too.
Oh, they do?
Yeah, they do both. So yeah, and this is kind of in that realm, and there are big events that do come here. I think we got a native power thing again, which will be in September. Umatilla, the big pool up there in the Columbia, will be up there, and I think there's 2 states there going to fish, Washington and Oregon, on their live events. And then at the same time, there'll be a power hour. Every hour there'll be a big fish prize, and there'll be, I think it's unlimited on how many you can catch, but they got to be, I think at that tournament, 14 or 15 inches maybe per fish to count them. So there's things on our onlines, it's got to be 12 inches or bigger to count it. But normally by the time that season's over, you're up in 17, 18, 19, 20-inch fish anyway. 3 or 5 fish you're counting, or, the season long as you get the top 5 largemouth and the top 5 smallmouth. In our case, the longest 5 of each species is what you count, or what they'll count. They automatically call as you send fish in.
Oh, gotcha. And how do you send fish in? Do you take a picture, or how does that look?
Yeah, a picture on a board. So we have a catch board, which is 26 inches long. It has like a fence. You got to put your fish up. It'll be on the left side or port side of your mouth. And then the mouth's got to be closed. You can't cover the eyes. You can't put your fingers under the gill plate, and you can't touch the tail. And we have identifiers with codes on them, so they know who you are basically, and what tournament you're in, and they'll score it that way.
That's cool. Right on. So it's all usually what you do are these tournaments mostly bass, or are there other species?
I mean, they do other species, but like they do redfish down south and stuff like that. But for me, it's bass. And I think there's walleye ones too, from what I recall. So.
Yeah, I see. Okay, so and the idea with the kayak fishing is that it basically just takes out the power boat, right? It's just more. Is that kind of the idea, that it just makes?
Yeah, the thing for me, it's less maintenance. I don't have a place for a boat anyway, and at my age, I sure as heck don't want one. For the maintenance and the motors and going to the salt, you got to run them out and all the other stuff that goes along with that. But we do have to register them if we put motors on them, which they just allowed this year.
Oh, really? Motors on kayaks?
Yeah, we can put motors on them if we want. Kind of takes away from some of it, but I voted yes to give everybody an equal field, because before that it was just a disabled people, which I qualify for too, but I didn't think that was fair for me to do that and run around circles around these guys that are tired. But now, I voted yes, because if I opt to get one, I can. I mean, I haven't pulled that trigger yet, but I can if I want to.
Right. And is this more like trolling motors?
Yeah, like they got like Torpedoes and Newport, and you can do I don't know, there's the Moda ones, or the Minn Kotas, make a lot of them for kayaks. It's expanded pretty well, way beyond what I thought when I got one. So
yeah. And are you using all of the like the sounders and stuff like that, fish finders on?
Yeah, I have a fish finder on mine now. Yeah, some guys these young guys, they crack me up because they got these big ones. I just got a little one. I use it basically just for depth and water temperature for me. I mean, I can go get a bigger one with side scans and all that, but I really don't want to do that. Not for me anyway. I'm having more fun than I'm taking it serious.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's interesting because the naming, we have Phil Roy, who's kind of he's our Stillwater guru. He's more focused on trout and stuff, but he's hosting episodes now for us on a separate series, and they call them sounders, mainly because they're not just about finding fish, right? Because a part of it is finding structure, maybe if you even don't see the fish, things like that. Do you find that when you're using it, you're looking for other things on top of just the fish?
Absolutely. You're looking for a hard bottom, especially like certain times of the year. And then if you're around a lot of weeds, you can see that kind of stuff. And then, like you can kind of see if you can figure out if it's a log or whatever's underneath you. Yeah, and some of it's really defined. You got to spend the money for the real high tech ones, but some guys have them on kayaks, and you can see a lot of stuff down there, depending on what you're using.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that you mentioned you finished in the top, kind of I don't know what it was, top 10 or in that range on a tournament. Can you take us to that tournament and talk about like paint that picture of what it looked like, the whole thing?
I think on that particular one, I think it was like I think that was where was that? That was in Idaho, I
Oh,
believe.
really?
Little Payette, I think I was in the top 10 in that time that realm there, or as close to it.
The little Payette, so this would be like the little Payette, like a reservoir or a lake or something?
Yeah, a little lake. It was out of where the heck was that? Lewiston, I think,
Oh,
Idaho.
Lewiston. Do you remember that pretty well? Like, can you talk about how, that win, is that like a day long thing, week?
Oh, actually, I'm sorry. That one was McCall. I had it mixed up with another one. I was thinking of another one, but that was McCall, Idaho. There's two Payette lakes there, and I think I was right close to the top 10 there in that tournament with fly. Yep.
What is that turn? Can you take us to like the start? So do you guys just start like day one, like first thing in the morning? Is there like paint that picture, what it looks like?
Yeah, so actually, most of the time they're out there before it gets daylight. So we have lights on our kayaks. You have to have a 360 no matter where you're at in any water. You have to have a 360 light. Some guys have port and starboard lights, which I'm not sure if that's required or not, but some guys have them. And then, so you get out, I think it's a half hour before daylight or something of that nature. You get out there, everybody's at the dock, or sometimes they allow you to have more than one dock you can launch from, but you got to check in and out. You check in, say, I'm here, I'm going in, and then you check out when you're done with the tournament. And normally it's an 8-hour tournament. So we get up in the morning. Like there, we were up like 3 in the morning. I think we are in the water by 4:30 because you got to drive from wherever your campsite is or whatever to get to the launch. And then everybody's at the launch trying to get their kayaks ready. Some guys have motors, some don't. And then you got all this gear you got to put in there, rods and things. And then everybody's waiting at the launch for the shotgun start, they call it. Sometimes it's just a whistle, not actual gun. But once that happens, it's time to go. And then you usually have a half hour after launch to where it's lines in, where you're looking at your clock, you're looking at your watch, you're looking at your phone, say, okay, it's lines in, then you can start fishing. Usually you're starting fishing before you can even see. So it's like, how am I gonna take a picture of this fish if I get one? And normally I'll wait till I can see before I even start fishing, but I'll actually get to my spot I want to start at. That's the whole idea. You get a half hour.
So you've already done research about the lake. You've already fished the lake.
Yeah, normally they give us a practice day the day before up until like 11 o'clock in the morning or whatever Marvin dictates. But normally, and then he's got a couple of helpers too, Jim Davis and then another fella in Idaho. But it's like you'll have a practice day the day before. And then a lot of times it's off limits the week before, so they don't want you to go in there and disturb the fish. So the other thing is they don't want to bother the fish too much as far as putting too much pressure on them. You want to catch them, but you actually let them go as soon as you can. So it'll we don't keep fish during tournaments, even other species, because we just don't. It's all catch and release, photo, and release them.
Right, right. That's cool. So when you go out to that first day and you're exploring, I mean, what are you looking for like in preparation? How are you finding the fish? How do you know where you're going to start the next day?
Well, for me, it depends on which species I'm chasing. Sometimes they have both, like largemouth. Sometimes three. Sometimes they have smallmouth, largemouth, and spots. We don't have a lot of spots in Oregon. I think one of the lakes I know about is Cottage Grove Lake. They have spotted bass, which I've never caught one that I recall. I mean, I might have caught one and thought it was a largemouth. I don't know. They're kind of similar, but I pursue smallmouth most of the time. I mean, if I'm in a tournament, and that's what I like to catch more than largemouth. But if it's a largemouth lake, I'm looking for cover. I'm looking for weed lines. I'm looking for grass. If it's smallmouth, I'm looking for rocks and hard bottom. That's just what I'm looking for. They love rocks. Rocks heat up quicker than anything in a lake. So if like early in the season, you look for the rock structures, or I did.
And this was early. Was that McCall one? Was that earlier in the season?
No, that was like mid-season, but it was still kind of chilly in the morning, but it was actually really nice in the day.
Gotcha. So that's it. So finding structure. And then when you're in there, when you're doing the tournament, so you go to these spots that you remember, and then how do you get down to the level? Let's just take it. Was McCall, was that mainly smallmouth or was that both?
That was smallmouth for sure.
Yeah, smallmouth. So when you're going for smallmouth, like, so you know where you think they're going to be, then how do you get down to the level? How do you find the fish?
Well, you kind of you can see fish on your graph, but then again, a lot of times I'm just winging that anyway, because I kind of you kind of know once you find it's searching. Like if you're using like even flies, you let it drop to the bottom, then you try midline water depths, and then you try the top water and see where you'll get a strike. And once you get that strike, you kind of hold in there until they quit doing that. Or even if you're using gear, I got different crankbaits on different depths that I use. I love the DT series, which is by Rapala, which you got a 4, 6, 8, 10, 20. You can use that series and cover all the column. And then I put a clip on there so I don't have to keep retying. So you just clip them on, try it. But usually I'll carry, if I'm using that kind of stuff, I'm usually got 3 crankbaits tied on different rods anyway.
I see. So that's cool. So you got to cover. And then in that tournament, did you have a deal where you had a fly rod and the spin rods on there?
No, that sometimes I just take fly rods. I say, I'm going to have fun today. I'm not going to stress about it. I'll just take fly rods. I had 4 fly rods on me that day.
Gotcha. Perfect. And then you had some luck. So what was that like? So you started catching some fish, and then must be a wide range of sizes and things like that.
Well, it was slow that day. Not a lot of people caught limits. It's like when we do those tournaments, it's 5 fish, but not everybody catches 5 fish. If it's slow, but there's some days when everybody catches over 30, 40 fish. We were at Billy Chinook one time, and they're all dinks. They're like 8 to 10 inches, but some guys caught a couple 14s and 12s, and they won the tournament. And I used flies exclusively that day too. And I'm up to caught over 40 fish, easy, landed, not the ones getting off. Just like semi-seal leeches.
Yeah, that's so like, and back to that McCall. So you're fishing that lake. You're fishing with flies. What type of flies are you fishing, and are you just doing like what's the technique?
So it's like I don't troll in a kayak very often. So it's usually strip a 1-1-2 or a 1-1-2-1. There's just you find a cadence that's going to work for the fish. And at that particular tournament, my success was completely on semi-seal leeches, a real easy pattern to tie. And I was just hammering them on that, the fish that I caught. I didn't hammer them. I mean, that was a bad call on that, but at Billy Chinook, I did. I hammered him there on a semi-seal. But as far as Payette, it was on a semi-seal also. But then again, I do some bait fish patterns that work well in the Columbia. So you got to pick and choose what flies. That's why I take 4 to 6 rods out in the Columbia with different lines and different flies. So the brush fish or bait fish brush or whatever, however the heck you say it. But anyway, it's not a hard fly to tie. And in the Columbia, they like that.
Okay. And that would be over. So what would be your flies? Let's say, smallmouth bass, largemouth bass. What are your top 5 flies that you'd be using out there for smallies?
Okay, for sure, a semi-seal leech would be number 1. Then the bait fish brush pattern would be number 2. Then I would have a popper for number 3. Then I'd have just a simple old woolly bugger for number 4. And then after that, I would probably have some kind of damsel pattern. Actually, I do. I wouldn't have one. I do have one. I have a damsel pattern or some kind of a bug imitation, or even my girdle bug I tie. It ain't really mine. I got it out of a book in '99. I just modified it. Then I tie for smallmouth on the Umpqua, but it works too in the Columbia. And it's just a simple girdle bug with different colors, and it works great. So those would be my 5.
That's right, the Umpqua. And so now we're getting into my realm that I know a little more. That's one I fish. How would you say fishing like the Columbia or that Payette or the Umpqua? Is the Umpqua about the same or easier to catch fish in?
No, the Umpqua is way easier to catch fish in. But the Umpqua is a number thing, like the John Day. I can go there and catch, and without exaggeration, 100 fish a day if I want to. Normally, I got people with me, kids, grandkids, veterans, fly club members that I'm helping, so I just don't pursue it. But if I'm like without pressure from helping people or that, I'm catching 100 fish a day if I want to. But as far as the Columbia, the thing about the Columbia that's better than the Umpqua is size. You're going to catch, I mean, they're averaging 12, usually 12 to 17 inches, and you're going to catch that 18, 19, and 20 periodically. And then as far as Payette, I don't know if I'll ever go there again. It's a long haul for me, but the fish were, I think the nice one I got was like right around 17, I want to say, 16 and a half, but they were fat. But again, there's nothing that beats a Columbia in Oregon, in my opinion, as far as smallmouth. I know there's some in lakes, and I know that Hagg Lake holds the smallmouth record in Oregon, I believe still. And I know they're pretty big in there, and I've caught big fish in there, but I haven't caught consistently the same fish I catch in the Columbia River.
Today's episode is sponsored by Togens Fly Shop. Togens Fly Shop provides superior quality products at a great price. They have also a great YouTube channel that you can check out right now with new fly tying tutorials each week. Togens also has you covered if you're looking for unique in-house products, and they also support many of the great brands out there that you know and trust. It's been fun connecting with Justin and the family over the years now, and it's been really cool. A great local fly shop. Togens is also offering their fly tying box, where they send out materials at a regular cadence where you don't even have to think of it. You just open the mailbox and there's your Togens pack. And I recently made an order through Togens, and the experience is always perfect. They've got you covered if you ever have questions or need any help, whether that's a YouTube tutorial or connecting with them personally. Since 2005, Togens has been over-delivering on customer service, and it's time for you to check out Togens Buzz for yourself. You can head over to wetflyswing.com/Togens right now to check out their diverse selection of products today. You support this podcast by clicking through that link to Togens online. That's Togens, Togens. Okay, back to the show. So, and then what about on largemouth? So are you doing equal amount of tournaments with largemouth versus smallmouth?
Yeah, so they bounce it around. And then even on the online, they'll have a smallmouth month, and they'll have a largemouth month. They'll have a lake lunker month, which is usually largemouth, but there's smallies in there in that type thing. And then, but I don't pursue them as much unless I have to score them on my tournaments, which I do in the onlines or the season long. So I'll be going like the Hagg and Drina and the coast lakes, whole largemouth, and not smallmouth on the coast lakes. And maybe they put smallmouth in there, I'm unaware of it, but that's where I'll go to get largemouth, is usually the coast when it warms up.
Okay, perfect. And for this for the Kayak Fishing Northwest, what's the next event coming up, or the next few events this year?
Well, there's actually a training event. I got the book in front of me. I'll open it up here. So there's a training event coming up at Hagg Lake. It's called the Season Kickoff. So anybody that listens to your podcast here can do this, and it's an open. And then you just go through Kayak Fishing Northwest and sign up. I think it's like, I want to say $35 or something. But then you get paired up. If you're a rookie, a new person, you get paired up with a veteran guy, and you go out with him. And I think for that tournament, it's like the best 3 fish or 2 fish, something like that. But the first one I ever did with that, I won, which was with a guy named Kenny, which was a good kid, and we had fun. I got lucky. It was another real slow day at Foster. But anyway, it's on April 8th at Hagg Lake.
Right around the corner.
Yeah, so it's pretty close. And that'll be the opener, which is the veteran with a new guy or a new woman or a new lady. That's what that'll be, because we have females as well, not just males, and everybody has a great time.
Yep, that's sweet. That's really cool. So,
And then, but the next one I'll actually be in would be probably, my first one will be probably Darina. So it'll be Darina Lake on May 13th. That'll be my first tournament, because I probably won't do the one in April.
yeah, May 13th. So these are these kind of every month of the year? Are there like 12 events?
No, well, there's 5 events per state
Per state.
per season. Yeah, so it'll be May, June, July, August, September. Those 5 months will be the day ones per state. And like I said, we added the Davis one after Crane Prairie in August. So that'll be the fly fishing one. So there'll be 6 in Oregon.
6 in Oregon, then, and then what are the other states? So Idaho,
Idaho and Washington.
and so when would be in Idaho similar dates? So May 13th, there'll be an event in Idaho.
Yeah, it won't be May 13th. So let me look. It'll be so they stagger dates. And we got qualifiers. I'll get into that in a minute for the West Coast Championship. But anyway, so let me see. Washington's first one.
And we'll put a link out, I'm sure, at kayakfishingnorthwest.com that probably has all this information, right?
Yes, absolutely. And then so 4:15 will be Washington's kickoff at Mason Lake, and then 4:22 will be Black Canyon Reservoir for Idaho. Those will be the kickoff events. And then starting in May, there's a couple that are the same dates, but most of them are all separated. But when you get into the qualifiers, so the first 3 events in each state are usually qualifiers for the West Coast Championship. And how you get into the West Coast Championship was last year was Clear Lake, California. I was there, and the year before that. And then so I qualified both years with a lot of guys. And then this year it's supposed to be at the California Delta in August. So we'll see if we qualify. But the thing is, you could do the top 25% of the people that are in one of these qualifying events can get into and qualify for the West Coast Championship, or you can do 3 qualifying events and not be in the top 25%. So that leads me to say that if, let's say this year I won't be able to do all 3 because I'm going to a fly fishing thing in Alaska with my wife in August, or actually July, so I will not be able to do the 3rd event at Green Peter. So the first 2 I'll have to qualify as in the top 25% of that field to get qualified for the West Coast Championship, or do an extra event in another state, which I did last year. I had to go to Idaho and do, it might have been Payette or Walcott, I don't remember. One of those were a qualifying event, or maybe it was Washington. I went to Washington too. I fish all 3 states if I have time, because I like all the guys in all 3 states. So we just hang out like the same thing on the veteran thing, but different. You know, you get bonded with certain people, you want to fish with them. But with that said, so you do 3 qualifying events, or you get in the top 25% of one of the qualifying events, and you qualify for the West Coast Championship.
Right on. And the West Coast Championship is the same deal. It'd be bringing together. Well, California, I'm sure, is huge. That's got to be gigantic.
Yeah, and that's usually a real big event. Like Clear Lake, I think. I don't want to exaggerate, but I think it started off like 120 people were qualified or actually signed up to do the event, and it ended up to be like 103 or 109 that actually did the event in Clear Lake, California. The lake's huge. You can hold as many people as you want to put on it, but it was really slow last year. The year before that, it was way better. So I didn't do it very good, but I did catch some fish. So
no, this is awesome. So what is it about, because we get into this, we've talked about this before with like Euro nymphing, and all the competitive fly fishing. Like, what is it about you that keeps you going here where you could just be out, on your own, just kind of floating around, not doing, like, why the competition?
I think that I always wanted to do it as a youth. So it's like, and how this started, this didn't start with me. So, I have kids too, right? So I have a boy named Mark Jr. that says, hey, Dad, let's go bass fishing. I said, okay, let me get the fly rods. Where do you want to go? He said, no, like we used to. Because I used to take him to Hagg when he was a kid. We used to catch a lot of smallmouth and largemouth. So I started with a couple rods, and this is funny because I got like, I don't know, 15, 20 fly rods, and all the stuff I invested in that. So I started with a couple rods. We got in tournaments. I said, well, I'll need the rod for this, a rod for that. Now, as we speak, I'm looking at 17 rods for bass fishing.
They're gear rods.
Gear rods. On top
You're about equal. You're almost equal.
It's crazy, but fishing's crazy, but it's like you can do other things with money, that are worse things to do. But anyway, it started with Mark Jr., and it was supposed to be a dad-son thing, and it just got bigger, and I got to know people. And I think if you're in the competition, it adds a little more oomph to your fishing. For me, a little more excitement.
And you probably get better. You probably actually maybe even get better because of the comp, right? That's the Euro anglers. That's what they say.
Yeah, well, this is the other thing. You hit something on the head that people don't think about. If you know how to gear fish for bass and fly fish for bass, it makes you way better. because you got both spectrums, and you can, and then, different way to read waters, or, depths and water temperatures, and are they on top? Are they in the middle? Are they on the bottom? You hit something that's really important on the head. It's like some guys are purists, which are cool if they want to do that. And I've done it. I've done it for over 20 years. But the thing is that I'm getting older, and sometimes that false casting with shoulders and wear and tear, it wears on you. But the thing is that I fish. I told, even though Hill and Waterfield, I said, I just discovered that I'm just a fisherman. I started off a spinner fisherman on the Deschutes River with my father when I was like 8 years old. At Mecca Flats is where I started fishing. I didn't know what it was called back then. We called it all kinds of weird names because there was a guy that owned the house, and my dad gave him whiskey to camp there.
Yeah, what'd you call it? What'd you call Mecca back then?
I think this is appropriate. We call it fat asses. There was a heavy fella there.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we'd camp right by his house. The guy'd have rattlesnakes in friggin' cages and stuff.
Oh, wow.
He was kind of out there, and we used to poke it we'd heat up a rod and put it in there, and the rattlesnake would snap at it. It was kind of...
Damn, he would have pet rattlesnakes?
Yeah, I don't know if they were pets. I don't think you can have a pet snake. I don't even think pet snakes are pet snakes.
But he would have pet in like a cage.
You have rattlesnakes in cages, yes.
Oh my gosh. That's intense. That is. So that's the big guy. That's the fat guy.
Yeah, the big guy. So we didn't have waders and stuff back then either. People, they didn't, I don't know. I'm not sure how your dad had you guys fishing, but we didn't have waders. We didn't have nothing. We slept under a tarp. My dad had a big old truck tarp. There were like 10 people in there. We'd fold it over. Everybody went up in there.
See, Mark, that's the thing about the old school. We always joke about it, right? Because it's like, oh, our kids, they don't understand it. But I mean, my dad, I've told this story before, but I mean, when I was like 12 or 13, so this probably would have been in the mid 80s or something, he'd be, maybe he was even younger. He'd do his guide trips. He'd go down on a trip. I'd be on the guide trip, right? Because I'd be there all summer with him. And then he'd leave me over like 2 days over the weekend until he came back for the next trip. And I was a young kid.
Yeah.
And so he's like, all right, go save the camp, and it was like, I mean, I can imagine leaving my daughters on the river by themselves.
Not anymore. Same thing. I mean, it's like he'd hand you a rod, he'd tie a lure on it or whatever, and said, here, go fish. And we'd run up and down Mecca Flats, all up and down there. And there'd be a whole bunch of us. But then again, it's like we would, and every time I'd break off, I think I just wanted his attention. I'd go have him tie the knot. And I think I really knew how to tie it. Say, hey, can you tie my knot? Broke it off again. But yeah.
How did you do that with your kids? How did you get your kids? How did you plant the seed with them on the fishing?
I think I eased them into it. Just like Sean, my youngest, he was like, I don't know, 6 or 7. I'd hook a fish down in the Umpqua for him and let him reel it in. Same thing with Mark and Josh. I have 3 boys, and I have 1 daughter that likes to fish, Samantha.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I have 4 kids out of my 6. I have 6 children.
You have 6 kids?
Yeah, they want to
Holy cow, amazing.
Yeah, I do. Yep. I started young, so I'm, 62. So Mark's 42. I started young. So
wow. Yeah, I always forget that. Yeah, I know you told me that before. 6 kids. So that must be pretty cool having all those kids, because it's like, like family, right? We started off this thing talking about family, but I mean, how is that for you? Do you just could you have 12 kids and be loving it too?
I could. Well, I need a village, you know that, right?
That's right.
Well, I got 8 grandkids already, and I have 2 greats already, because oldest grandson, my daughter started early, is right behind Sean, which Sean's 23, so Alex is 22.
Wow.
In June he'll be 23.
Where are your kids? So you got these 6 kids. Are they spread around the country, around the Northwest?
No, they're all here. I got 2 in St. Helens, 1 downtown. I got 1 over northeast. Where's the other one? The other one, and 2 of them are in, like, one's Hillsboro, one's Beaver.
That's cool. That's cool that everybody's there. That's pretty amazing.
We see each other when we can, but they got lives. They grow. It's like being a father. You say, hey, you're older now. You got to figure it out.
I know. Yeah, I think about that, about my deal. Like I was saying, we just had a, family member pass away, and you start thinking about that stuff. You're like, wow, this could happen quick. And that's part of the reason why I started the podcast, where I'm kind of trying to do that tracking of, the storytelling there. Is that, I mean, my dad, we both know my dad, right? I mean, he's in his mid 80s. He hasn't fished in a while now. And, and he's still doing pretty good. but he's slowed down a lot, and it's one of those things where, man, I just kick myself every time. I'm like, man, I need to go over there and see him more often, but I just struggle with it because it's like life is there.
Yeah, I call him
Do
periodically,
you?
as you know, or I thought you knew. Yeah, but yeah, I just check on him and say, hey, how you doing? I invite him every year. I go to the Umpqua, but I know he's getting older and it's hard for him to get down there and get around. So I don't necessarily want to bother him. I just want to say, hey, man, I'm here if you need me, or that type thing. Because I really admire your dad, and I really respect him and what he's done. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. What do you think it is about my dad, what he's done that makes it so, I don't know. I'm in the inside, right? So it's hard for me, but what do you think about my dad? I mean, he had the fly shop, he had some things. What do you think is respectable about his thing?
His drive. When you have a drive, same thing I talk to my kids about. If you can either, like me, I'm a disabled vet, 3 hip surgeries, bad vertebrae, this that. I can sit on my butt and get chunky, or I get off my butt and do something. I write articles when I can, but your dad's a heck of a writer, and very, very commendable, very good at what he does. I know he's a teacher and things, but in his fishing, he's very well versed on it. I mean, he's a great fisherman. I mean, I know he's getting old, but he was great caster, great fisherman. I mean, I taught him things about bass, but once he got it, he was catching the heck out of them. So
That's right. I always feel like the older generation, like we're talking about these old guys, but my dad was just, he was like pretty much a professional athlete, and you know what I mean, like almost baseball, basketball, right? Went to University of Portland at the highest levels, and it seems like the next generation we lost a little bit, right? We weren't quite as good.
oh yeah.
It seems like that's the way it goes sometimes. I don't know.
Well, they don't realize, I mean, not everybody, but I'm just saying in general that people don't realize how tough people were back then. I mean, how much they had to endure. No, we didn't have phones and directions on our phones, and we didn't have waiters. We didn't have much of anything. We had metal connections on rods and this and that. I mean, it's like tough people. I remember coming out. It was winter, snow on the ground. The way my family were, we just jumped in jeans, and they don't get warm. You come out, you're freezing, but you just do it. You suck it up. You grit your teeth and do it. That's the same thing. That's the mentality of like a military guy, basically, or your dad or my dad. You suck it up and do it. I mean, you can bellyache and complain or whatever you want to do, but nothing's going to change unless you go do it.
I know. One of my favorite. There's this book. I've said this before. I always love going back to this one, but it's called the War of Art, right? And not the art of war, but the war of art. And Stephen Pressfield talks about. He makes the analogy to basically the challenges that people face to be successful. And he talks about how you have to be like a Marine. You got to be like just ready for the pain. You got to come back day after day. You got to remember it's going to be failure after failure. Like he was an author, and he wrote like 20 or 30 books that all failed, and then finally he wrote The Legend of Bagger Vance, and it got him into the place. But that's the thing. Like anything, people should realize it. Always think about that, because like it's not easy to be successful and great at things, right? You gotta like be in the trenches. Do you feel that that's kind of your outlook too?
That's exactly right. So, there's mind over matter. I mean, if this is how I'll deal with this, is that if I suck into the pain and let the pain control me, nothing's going to change for me. Or if somebody is struggling, like just say in college or anything of that nature, to where they just say, okay, it's too hard, they're never going to achieve it unless they keep trying. Well, it's like, when I was doing arts way back when, the martial arts stuff, is that, when I taught that stuff, I said, if somebody's on you, pounding on you, are you going to lay there and take it? Or are you going to respond and say, okay, this ain't working. I'm going to have to do something to defend myself, or I'm going to have to read more. I'm going to have to study more. I'm going to have to train more. It's up to individuals. To me, as I relay to my grandkids' kids, it's like it's up to you. I mean, it's up to you on how good you're going to be in the United States. And we've got a lot of people coming in here. Yeah, you can be great here, or you can be not great here. It's kind of how you want to do things for yourself. It's all self-motivation and your drive. And I always talk about drive, because if you don't have drive, it's going to be hard on them, no matter who you are, you know?
That's right. Yeah, the drive is the key. So what is your drive? Like what keeps you going strong and all this stuff?
The excitement or the, there's a certain amount of, need for me to get out in the woods in the wild because that's how I grew up. My dad was outdoorsy and this and that. And there's a certain amount of excitement, as I said, and just to go do it. And, the challenges of it, I think, is the challenge for me. It's the competition, yeah, but it's more the challenge of me versus the fish. I watched, or the challenge of me versus whatever I'm doing. I'm retired now, but then again, I'm not retired because I can't stay idle. I got to go do stuff.
My guess is you're as busy now as you were probably when you were working or whatever.
Maybe more in some ways because, well, and it's like one of my daughters, she said, well, I got this. And I said, I worked my butt off when I worked, and I was never a lazy guy. I'm not a lazy guy now. So it's like, well, you got to, have your kid go with you, or how are you going to train them, or this or that. When I hear certain things, it's like, you got to have that drive to do it, but it's more about, the training of yourself to be motivated, basically. And I've always been motivated. Your dad's motivated. He's very motivated. I'm sure he still is now. I haven't seen him in a while, but I've talked to him.
Yep. Yeah, he still is.
He's still writing and doing things.
Yeah, definitely. Nice. Well, I think, the bass thing was something I wanted to touch on. I think we're not going to be able to go fully into it. Just because there's so much. There's all the gear side. Like, where do you go when where are you getting your education on bass? Is this all self-taught, or are you, there's some folks out there you've been following?
No, it's not self-taught. So I learn, and that's another thing I guess I want to say is that you don't stop learning, right? I might know how to throw a crankbait or a fly rod, and I'm always watching different stuff on YouTube or new techniques. Or YouTube, I think nowadays is a blessing for a lot of things. You can learn how to cook. You can do a lot of things on that. So I watch a lot of YouTube, and I listen to people. I don't just try to blurt out that, hey, I'm the best, this and that. I don't do that. I'm saying I want to learn, right? I'm not an old dog yet, even though I'm an old salty dog, but I'm not an old dog yet,
Yeah.
But it's like I learn all the time. And I think that's the key is if you keep learning and trying to improve yourself, no matter who you are or where you're going, then that's a blessing for yourself. And it warms your heart to know that you're accomplishing something.
Yeah. Yeah, it does. What's this? You mentioned a trip up to Alaska. What's that a trip looking like?
Yeah, so I actually Jim Teeney referred this.
Oh, nice.
I was looking for a place to go in Alaska for me and my wife to go fly fishing, and he referred the Duncan brothers. Which,
oh yeah, of course.
Yeah, so we talked about it. We talked, and I hung up the phone after talking to one of the Duncan fellows, and Beth looks at me and says, we're not going to take money and this and that with us. Let's just do it. So we signed up to go in July to we go to Anchorage to Bethel and then take a puddle jumper out to what they call lower base, and we'll be out there for a week fly fishing with these guys on the boonies.
Yeah, yeah, they've got a few camp. Well, they've got some cool stuff because they have. We did a recent episode with George Cook, and he was talking about some of the history of the Duncans because I had that. My dad used to do that too, right back in the day. The Duncans, and I think the kids are still running, but they have some cool stuff. They've got a camp. They've got, I'm not sure if they have a lodge, but yeah, they do some, like, are you guys going for rainbows or for Chinook, or what are you going for?
So when we go up in July, there's going to be, Chinooks will be in the tail end, but there'll be a lot of sockeye, chum, rainbows, grayling, maybe pick up a silver or two, but that's basically it. And they hit them on mouses and mice, and it's going to be a hoot. But there's a video on it on YouTube if you look up fly fishing Alaska with the Hushin brother, Hushin, whatever that site is, that guy does. But it shows exactly the trip that I'll be going on, me and Beth.
Oh, good. We'll get a link out in the show notes to that as well, so we can take a look at that video.
I'll send it to you when we're done.
Okay. Yeah, send it to me, and we'll put it in the show notes.
And then we can look at it. But it's actually, I'm going on that trip, and we're excited about it. It'd be different, I'm self-sufficient at fishing. I'll hire a guide periodically because either I know them or I want Beth to catch fish. other than something I don't do a lot of, because I don't do a lot of salmon steelhead fishing. Even though I've caught plenty of salmon on flies, I have not caught a steelhead on a fly yet. I've got them on gear, but I don't really pursue it. It's that I like to catch fish. I don't like to go looking for them or have to wait a week or two or a month. And God bless them, people who do that, but I can't do it. I just have a hard time. I got to go catch fish, man.
I know steelhead is one of those. There's well, you talked about the Stillwater stuff. I mean, you got muskie was another one of those species that's like, does that have any interest to you?
Yeah, actually, and I've been offered by some of the guide friends I got. This won't be me paying out of pockets when they have free time going to look at stuff. I just go with them. But yeah, muskie is a big interest for me. I know we got them up at what is that, Mayfield?
Up in
Yeah, we got 'em
Washington.
up there. Yeah, and I got
Yeah.
a buddy from Washington that goes up there and catches them. He's a great guy. He's good at fishing. He's a fly fisherman. These huge flies for those things, over a foot long for those flies.
Yeah, it's really cool. Muskie's another one of those species, kind of like steelhead, right? You got to put your time in, and might get that one chance.
Yeah, I still steelhead fish, but I don't put in the time of the guys that love it. I don't love it. I mean, I like it, but I don't love it. Bass, on the other hand, I love. So I mean, we all have a species that we kind of fall in love with. I got choked with trout when I was a kid by my dad, and then I started catching these weird looking fish at Hagg Lake a long time ago, where I made up one of my flies that is in your dad's book, actually.
Uh-huh. Oh, really?
Brindle bugger. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's right. The Bringo. Yeah.
Practical fly fisher. But I was watching bass chase perch, and it's like, okay, I can tie something that looks like that, and I did. And by golly, that thing still works.
That's cool. Yeah, we'll put a link in the show notes to the. Maybe we'll find that, the Practical Fly Fisher. I think that was one of my dad's first books.
Yeah, I'm in that one.
Yeah, and you're in that one. Good. So we'll do that. And no, this is good, Mark. This has been a lot of fun. How about we take it out here with our 2-minute drill? We got a few rapid fire questions, and then we'll kind of wrap it up.
Well, do her, man. Let's go.
All right, let's do it. All right. So first of all, I always love to start off with a little multimedia on music. So do you have what's your type of music, band, or give us something we can listen to on the way out of here?
Bachman Turner Overdrive, Taking Care of Business.
All right, nice. All right, perfect. What is so with your fly rod, you've only got one rod you can use for smallmouth bass fishing. What is it, length and weight?
It would be it'd be actually my 6-weight Thomas & Thomas zone.
Okay, 9 foot?
9 foot. Yep.
9 foot. Okay, great. What is your one bass tip? If somebody's out for smallies, they're kind of maybe new to it and they're heading out their first time, what do you tell them?
Be patient.
Yep, be patient. So does that mean you're on a spot, just stick tight?
Yeah, because eventually you're going to find them. And once you find them, then you kind of hold in there. But sometimes searching, because I'll move around. Smallmouth move more than largemouth. Largemouth are more sluggish. I don't think they're lazy. It's just the way they are. They're more of a warmer water fish and less current. Smallmouth are definitely more current, and they move around chasing. They'll chase shad all over the place, or bait fish they're chasing. The largemouth kind of hold and wait more.
Yeah, they wait more. Okay, and what about your trip? So you're doing this Alaska thing. Do you have another big bucket list trip you want to put together down the line?
Not yet, but we're working on stuff like that. I think that eventually go fishing with David Stewart.
That's right. Well, maybe we could do. Maybe if you guys, we've talked about this Umpqua thing, but I think this bass thing would be fun. Actually, I would love to get out there on a day with you in a kayak and do exactly what we've been talking about today.
Well,
maybe that's
there's good news. Beth has one that sits here most of the time, and by golly, you can jump in it. And then I have just real fast. I have paddle yaks too for like the Umpqua, so you don't break your drives.
Oh, okay.
So because it's a moving river and it's small, so we don't take the big Hobies down there. We take paddle kayaks.
Paddle kayaks, sure. Okay, good. Paddle kayaks where you can have your gear and like you can do overnight camping and stuff.
You can if you want, but normally we'll go A to B and go back down to where we're camped anyway, like some Sawyer's Rapids or Big Cave, wherever you're at.
Yeah, I would love to do that. Yeah, we've done the drift boat thing over the years, and that's always been fun. But I think kayaks would be a lot of fun too.
Yeah, I go to Sawyer's, and it's on. When is it? 8th to the 11th, I think, of June. Sawyer's Rapids. It'll be, and then Salmon Creek fly fishers will be there. The veterans will be invited. Any family will be invited. We'll be there.
Oh, you'll be there. So this is it. So okay, so let's follow up. We got a couple things to follow up on there, and then we'll get the kayaks going. And Cool, Mark. Well, that's all I have. That wraps up our little drill here. I mean, I feel pretty good about this. We've been talking about this a long time, catching up. It was fun to talk a little about the family at the start and make that connection to you. And I think we'll just kind of keep in touch here. And I appreciate your time today and shedding the light on everything we talked about. And looking forward to seeing you at Albany.
You'll see me in Albany. And by golly, thank you very much. And hopefully it comes out well. And we just had a great conversation and a lot of information. So.
There it is, wetflyswing.com/454. You can head over right now to that URL 454 and get some of the links and check out what we talked about. Even that Skeena Space School, you can check out. We'll have a link there where you can join and enter. Actually, you can join and just get some information on that trip. Skeena Space School Lodge. Right now, it's also at wetflyswing.com/school. And you can see if we have any availability left on that trip, and I'll fill you in on the details. Skeena River doesn't get any better than that. It's been a number of years since I've been there, and I'm excited to get back this year and hopefully see you up at the lodge and on the Skeena River, hanging out with some amazing water and some amazing fishing. Okay, let's do a quick listener shout out before we get out of here. Dale Cullum. Dale reached out and said he lives in British Columbia, Canada, and he said his favorite species, he's got a 3-way tie here. He's got rainbows, cutthroat, and bulls. So all 3. He couldn't choose one, so he just picked all 3. That's pretty amazing. Dale also says, love the podcast. Keep doing what you are doing. Thanks, Dale, for checking in. I appreciate your support on this podcast and for dropping a line quickly there on email. Look forward to catching up with you soon. If you want to get a shout on this podcast, reach out to me, Dave@wetflyswing.com anytime, and let me know where you're coming from. Especially if it's been a while or if you've never checked in with me, you can do that right now. It's really easy. Social media, if you're out there, Instagram, Facebook, wherever. I would love to hear from you, and just let me know if you've been listening, if you enjoyed this podcast, if you're listening to the very end and haven't connected, now is a chance. We've been talking to some people around Europe, which has been amazing. I know there's a few people out there that are listening as well. So if you get a chance, would love to hear from you. It's what keeps me going strong, knowing people are listening and loving what we're putting out there. Let's take a quick look where we are heading next right now. Let's see where we're heading next. Where are we heading next on this podcast? Okay, what are we heading next? Wow. Okay, so next week we are jumping into another amazing week. So we got a Catskills episode. We're going to go deep on the Catskills next week. That's going to be a big one. And then later that week, we got Craig Richardson on from the Euro School. Craig's going to be one of our guides on the Euro School this year. And if you're on that trip, you don't want to miss this episode because Craig, along with Pete Erickson and his team, Craig is going to be one of the guys. And I can tell you right now, this episode is going to be epic. He is bringing some tips that you're going to need, and he digs in a little more to the trip. So this is exciting for that. And also, yeah, even if you're not going on that trip, always good if you're interested in Euro nymphing. This is the one to check out. And I'm just going to leave it at that, and we will check in next week with you. And I hope you right now are having a great morning, a great afternoon, or great evening wherever you are in the world. And if you get a chance to connect with me on the water or online, that would be great. But until then, have a good one. Talk to you then.
Thanks for listening to the Wet Fly Swing Fly Fishing Show. For notes and links from this episode, visit wetflyswing.com.